All right, we are all set with the recording. Welcome everyone to our presentation, Eating Disorders in the Military. My name is Lydia Rhino. I am the Program Director at the Eating Disorder Foundation, and I am so glad to see everyone logged in tonight. Tonight's workshop is brought to you in collaboration with the Eating Disorder Foundation and SEA WAVES. I'm going to take a moment to share a little bit about the Eating Disorder Foundation. We are a nonprofit that was founded in 2003 with a mission to be an effective resource in the prevention and elimination of eating disorders through free and accessible education, support, and advocacy. We are a Denver-based organization that is now serving individuals and families, both nationally and internationally. I want to thank anyone who made a donation upon registration. We're able to provide free services because of the generosity of our community. If anyone has questions for our presenter this evening, I invite you to use the chat feature to communicate with me directly through the workshop. The chat is kept confidential and will come to me directly. Please wait until I'm done reading my opening statements before sending anything so I can make sure that the chat is in the proper setting. And we will save time for Q&A after the presentation, and I will deliver the questions to our presenter. We will not be sharing the PowerPoint tonight. However, we are recording, and we will send the recording as soon as possible. I'd like to now introduce you to our speaker. Leah Stiles is a retired Navy senior chief with over 20 years of distinguished service in public affairs. She is the founder of SEA WAVES, which stands for Support, Education, Awareness, Wellness, and Validation for Eating Disorders and Self-Care. SEA WAVES provides free clinical screenings, educational resources, and proactive outreach to service members and their families. With Pentagon approval and inclusion in programs like Military OneSource and the Wounded Warrior Project, SEA WAVES bridges the gap between existing resources and those who need them the most. Through initiatives like Medal Training Program and the Lighthouse Project, the organization fosters a culture of resilience, informed leadership, and accessible care. Leah's dedication to addressing eating disorders and mental health challenges within the military community is both personal and professional, inspiring waves of change wherever her message reaches. With that, I would like to hand it over to Leah for the evening. And everyone, make sure to be sending questions in if you have them throughout the presentation. And with that, Leah, feel free to get started.
Hi, good evening. Thank you, Lydia, for that great introduction. So it doesn't leave that much more for me. So yes, I'm Leah, retired Navy senior chief and founder of SEA WAVES. I really love using my voice to speak on a subject that I'm just so passionate about. I know that speaking on eating disorders, especially in the military community, can be a difficult topic. Sometimes in some places it's still taboo, and I really enjoy creating a safe place for connection, education, questions, and just really get that information out there. Yeah, this is again a little bit more about me, about my history, my 20 years in the Navy. I did primarily serve in the air community, so multiple aircraft carriers, the George H.W. Bush and the George Washington, as well as served as a combat photographer at Combat Camera, and I had a really diverse and great career. I am going to switch over now to a short movie that kind of really says how we got here. If we're going to give it a shot, it worked, when we were setting things up, and hopefully we can hear the volume. And if not, then we'll flex. So let's see how this one goes.
For as far back as I can even remember, I sought comfort from the trauma of my childhood with the mystical magic of the ocean. Dolphins, mermaids, and the infinite depths of water brought me a sense of peace and hope, anchoring my spirit in times of turbulence. It made perfect sense that I would one day join the US Navy and embark on a 2-decade voyage as a sailor. Along the way, I encountered personal struggles and setbacks that threatened to steer me off course. Yet, deep within, I discovered the resilience of a seasoned mariner, navigating through stormy waters with unwavering determination. I witnessed the heartbreak of loved ones falling into the dark abyss of despair, including my own mother, close mentors, my niece, and too many shipmates to count. It instilled a profound fear within me. I feared that my own story might echo the same tragic tune. During my time on active duty, I often tried to be a lighthouse, to cast a guiding beam for my shipmates' mental health. However, I faced challenges, mindful of the delicate balance between caring for their well-being and navigating the currents of my own career. See, I have come to understand that eating disorders thrive in the darkness of secrets. My voice, once a faint echo, struggled to rise above the crashing waves, unable to shout from the mass that my shipmates suffered silently. Doing so would also mean revealing my own intimate secrets that I battled with eating disorders for over 2 decades. The deeper I descended into my eating disorder, the higher I climbed in my personal and professional life. But the cost was heavy, as the weight of secrets and lies strained against the very fiber of my integrity. A dear mentor, like a compass guiding my soul, once spoke of the transformative power of honesty. They believed that embracing truth, my story would provide hope and encouragement to those who needed it most. Despite the fear and shame, I grew tired of navigating treacherous waters shrouded in deception. I gathered my courage and took a leap of faith, publicly unfurling my truth to all who would listen. The response was a tidal wave of support. Messages flooded in from others silently battling their own demons. Their whispers intertwined with mine, forming a mighty voice. Together we vowed to fight, not only for our own survival, but for the sanctity of each other's, our brothers and sisters in arms. Now, in the tranquility of retirement, as I mend my sails and find peace in calmer seas, I am determined to use my voice as a resounding foghorn to amplify the voices of my fellow warriors. It has become my life's mission, my North Star, to unapologetically aid every service member battling with eating disorders. With unwavering resolve, I am committed to establishing beacons of awareness, education, and support for my military family, navigating alongside them through uncharted waters.
So thank you for taking the time to start this off with a clip, with a movie. Let me see if I can switch off that screen. There we go. That was actually made by a sailor that I worked with, and I thought it was just an amazing way to start us off, to encompass kind of how we got here and why I feel like it's so important for me to use my voice for my brothers and sisters that for one reason or another can't yet. I say yet. And so I think that I am extremely blessed to lead the charge of shining a light on this important topic. So this is the breakdown of our learning objectives tonight. I want to just give you a peek into the military culture. I look at how disorder behaviors have become normalized. Look at some of the barriers to treatment and recovery. Look at some of the unique stressors that happen through the military community. Talk about some resources, and then finish up talking about the Lighthouse Project and really how we can all come together and make a difference moving forward. So many of the things that make us great service members also make us, I guess you could say, great slash terrible with eating disorders, right? There's so many things that mirror. Right away, I would say dedication. You see that so much in service members, but then it become also on the other edge of the sword, become to where it's an inflexible adherence to these unhealthy coping mechanisms. Same thing with perfectionism. It made me a great sailor, a great service member, but it made me even more obsessive and lost in my eating disorder. And then same with order and control. So important in the military to have routine and discipline, but when you feel removed from that, when you feel that you don't have that order and control, it's so easy to lean on a coping mechanism that may have just been, once or twice, or to prepare for a BCA, or something, that you relied on as a teenager, for it to sneak back up and become something that you absolutely rely on. I have included some testimonies of sailors. This is a super Navy presentation tonight. Go Navy. We often have a great variation across our branches, but tonight we are representing the Navy. This is Lieutenant Megan Quinn, and she's active duty, and she serves as a Navy psychiatrist, and she's so brave about telling her story and really what she was thinking when she was in the depths of her eating disorders. And right there in the quote, you see she was more worried about losing her future career than losing her life. And it can really, really happen just that easily, that you shift that focus, and it's hard to see the bigger picture. This is retired Master Chief Jeff Walker. And I actually met Jeff my very first day of inpatient treatment. He was active duty, I was active duty, and we both ended up in treatment together from the same base. We hadn't met each other. He walked up and he put his hand out and to shake my hand, and he said, I'm glad to have a sister here, and that's key word for Navy Chief Petty Officers, brothers. We call each other brothers and sisters, and I knew right away. And he's done a really great job of sharing his testimony and where his eating disorder got him removed. He was chief of the boat for his submarine. He was the senior most enlisted leader, and because he just could not prioritize his health with his career, it came down to an emergency inpatient treatment. And we'll talk a little later about how this impacts military readiness. But right in Jeff's case right there, that submarine didn't have their senior enlisted leader with absolutely no notice. So it's so important to talk about early intervention and self-care, right? This is now retired Master Chief Carrie Hammond. And again, she was very, very driven sailor, a wonderful leader that put her health aside, and nobody knew about it until she had a panic attack at work. And then she was just, from that day forward, ready to tell her story that it was an eating disorder that she was suffering from. So I should put a trigger warning. I go back and forth with having that. If this is difficult, please just shut the screen off. But I also, as somebody who speaks through photos in journalism and communication, as you could see in the movie that we led to, I really think that this juxtaposition picture is important to tell. I think it's important to show that these pictures were back to back, that I was a very successful, driven senior chief, and I was sick. And so much of, again, what reinforces me being a great leader and a great service member is what made me sick. So let's talk about each item. High expectations for performance. That's that perfectionism again. And always the pressure to be ready, to be mission ready. Don't be weak. Don't be the weakest link. And so keeping that external, right? Keeping that picture perfect view from the outside of a leader in uniform. There are strict weight and fitness standards. They've changed, and recently some have gotten, in my opinion, better. But they still exist, and they're always going to exist, right? The military has to have a fit community. And so how do we work with that? And how do we make sure that we maintain our health while meeting standards? The regular weigh-ins were extremely difficult for me and triggering, even when I was at no risk of failing. It wasn't necessarily the standards, right? For me, it was just being the smallest version of myself that I could be when the weighing is a public thing for the body composition assessment. It happens in large areas, right? You have to get a lot of sailors weighed, in the same morning and then get back out to work. So oftentimes in a huge gymnasium or on an aircraft carrier on the flight deck or in the hangar bay. And so it's very public. And so, me stepping on top of on the scale, knowing that anybody and everybody could see. And then, my goodness, if and when you don't pass that predetermined number that's set for you, then you go over to the next group where they break out what we call rope and choke. So it's the tape measure, and they measure 3 different parts of your body. And to get the smallest circumference of your waist, you do lift up your shirt so it's flat against your skin. And so that alone, it can be just extremely triggering and difficult to navigate. I would say for those with an eating disorder and those without, can be triggering. And then it's super aware when you go from station to station, whether or not you pass the first one or the second one, and then there's a list that comes out whether you've passed or not. And so I think that having those things set inadvertently is a breeding ground for some of these triggers that can pull behaviors. Um, there's a lot of hyper focus appearance and strength. The fight to fit mentality. I saw this especially when I was stationed at the Combat Command. There wasn't a lot of females, and we had to be we had to be combat ready at all times, and always wanting to be 100% all the time. Food as a control mechanism. So there's a lot of things in the military you can't control. And chow time is one of them. And then sometimes it is. And then sometimes your options just really aren't even that exciting either. I don't know if you've ever had an MRE, a meal ready to eat, but this is like, think of old time TV dinners, but without heating it up even. So it's not that much of a wonderful choice. And then, deployed on an aircraft carrier, the cooks do an amazing job of trying to make 4 meals a day for 5,000 people. Think about that, 20,000 meals a day. And so while they do a great job and try to work in variety, you're still going to end up with chicken most of your meals. But and just not having those options like that you would feel comfortable with, or your comfort food. You can bring snacks on deployments most of the time, but when you look at things like fresh food and what's available when it's fresh, you're out to sea for weeks and months. And so when the fruit is delivered, and then you're out to sea, like the bananas they don't last, the fresh lettuce that doesn't last. So the fresh food doesn't last that long, and you go with what you can until you get replenished again. So food does become a control mechanism. And also, there's other coping mechanisms that people use when they're not in the military or not deployed. Not an option for service members, right? Like a zero tolerance for drug policies. You're not going to be having alcohol on deployments. Well, sailors do on Liberty when you pull in the port. Um, but other than that, that's just also really not an option, which is good, right? Like that's great, but it does narrow down what your coping mechanisms are. It does limit what your options may be. And then you look at the perfectionism as a coping mechanism and just being able to push yourself further and further as far as you can, even in times when you just aren't sure that you can. Failure is not an option. One thing that's been really difficult as I meet with other commands and leadership is really being able to point out what's disordered. I look at eating disorders and disordered eating on a spectrum, and you know you have the green area and then the yellow, orange, and then the red. In the green area, I put intuitive eating and just knowing for you know your body and just having a good, clear communication and relationship with your body and its needs. In the middle is where so many of us live, in the yellow, orange, where you know, you're not always going to be in the green area, but there's some disordered things that happen, and then they kind of blend over to the red area, which would be an eating disorder. Um, so much of what happens in the military, especially in preparation for the body composition assessment, so the measurements that happen, some commands are, some branches it's once a year, some branches it's twice a year, but it's regularly. And you see it, you can go on any base at any given time, and somebody's preparing for this physical readiness test and this body composition. And what they're doing these days is what they were doing when I joined in 2001. So much of the same things. And you know, we get stuck in that, well, it's the way it's always been, so we don't need to change it. It's the way, you know, always could be. But I really want to point out a lot of the things that are happening when people are concerned about making weight, and they reach out to leadership or they reach out to their peers for advice and support. And it really falls under the umbrella of camaraderie. Like, we don't want to see anybody fail. We don't want to leave anybody behind. And so we give the advice that we've seen been given or may have been given to us. So these are screenshots from some of the female Navy um, Facebook groups where people are coming and asking for support from either their peers, or some of these are senior enlisted leaders. And this is some of the advice that's given. And if you're wondering if any and all of these are in the bright orange area, these are disordered. These are not okay. Shrinking your body by any of these means, although you see it regularly, these are not healthy and this is not good. But this is what has been normalized over time. And and we really have to call it out. We really have to call it out for what it is. It's disordered. Now, one of these young ladies was coming to look for advice to come back from maternity leave. She couldn't fit um, her pre-pregnancy uniform, so she wanted to shrink her body to fit into her uniform. And this advice of giving, you know, restricting calories down to 300 was given to a breastfeeding woman. Extremely dangerous and should not be given under any circumstance. And so these are some of the impacts. Why? Why should we not do the things on that previous screen? Because any of those things can put you in a state of low energy availability, among many other reasons, as far as service goes. If you want to have efficient training, you don't want to be on a flight deck, 110-degree weather, taking pictures as my sailors did on the flight deck, or catching jets or launching jets when you're in a state of dehydration, and it's extremely dangerous, not only for yourself, but those around you, and for the mission. So it's so important to know that you are limiting your endurance and stamina. Although so many times we do this under our athletic umbrella, where we're trying to be the most athletic version of ourselves, you're actually going to have a slower recovery rate from injuries and from workouts. And this is all just impacting you if you're just always on the go. So we don't stop to take a moment to see that each of these factors are playing a piece in our mission and in our readiness. And so this is another way of just really looking at how it's impacting us on a mission ready level. We always want to be part of that team and to do our best by our teammates, but the result is that we're not accomplishing what we hope to accomplish there. Here's some statistics and facts about eating disorders in the military. Military personnel are 3 times more likely to develop an eating disorder than civilians. This also goes for military dependents and family members. And every 52 minutes, somebody dies as an eating disorder. That is military and civilian alike. Suicide rates are significantly higher for those with untreated eating disorders. And in fact, the #1 cause of death for somebody with an eating disorder is suicide. And so when you mix the military culture with disordered eating, you're really raising those numbers high. And I know one thing, if you meet any service member, veteran, family member, leader, we will tell you we want to get after that 22 veterans a day that we lose to suicide. Like, that's in our mission. Like, there's so many of us working towards that. And for us to do that, we absolutely have to bring eating disorders into that conversation. It shows that 1/3 of females and 1/5 of males in the military are struggling with disordered eating. So if we're not providing them with the support and the resources that they need and deserve, then we're not meeting them where they are and doing our part and getting after that 22 a day. There are complex realities of military life. This was the day I got home from my first deployment. This picture actually went viral. That's the funny thing about homecoming when you're a photographer, is that all your photographer friends catch you in your best and in your worst moments. This picture went viral because so many people believed that it was a beautiful moment for homecoming. But it was actually me crying because my daughter didn't remember me. So it took quite some time for we walked down the pier, and by the time I buckled her in her car seat, she looked at me really confused and she said, "Mommy?" And I was like, "Yeah." And she's like, "Oh, mommy." And so she did kind of remember, but we had to do our work and work things out. She's actually 22 now, and she remembers me, but it doesn't take away the sting, right? It doesn't take away the sting of these complex realities of family and separation. And so deployments are going to be a thing. And even our service members that aren't deployed, it's still high pressure environments, right? And so the stress of military life is stateside, it's deployed, it's everywhere. Um, we also look at some of the things that do come along with military service, such as PTSD and MST. And there are strong correlations between MST and eating disorders. And so that definitely plays a factor in that storm of creating this. And we talked about separation from family and our support systems. Oftentimes you're stationed away from home. You're away from your support system where you grew up, or your people, your friends, your family. We do know with eating disorders, a lot of times they can be triggered when leaving home at a young age. We see that a lot with people going to college. At the same age, of young people going to college is oftentimes you see them enlist. And so that's before they've really developed those strong personal skills, take them out of their comfort zone, and it puts them in that complex reality. And then there's always the mission first mentality. I will say that I have seen a strong improvement over the past couple decades of encouraging service members to take care of themselves, but there's still going to be a lot of stigma of prioritizing yourself when you live and breathe the mission first mentality. And then we have barriers to treatment and recovery. So we'll lead right there with the stigma. There's still the fear of appearing weak or having a damaged reputation. And that's with all mental health issues is, and that comes from not that really plays a part in not only seeking treatment for yourself, but when you know somebody, I'll call them a shipmate that is struggling, you don't want to call them out or put them on the spot or report them or make a scene because you just want to hope that it's going to get better and you don't have to damage their reputation. So we see that a lot. I had talked with a great shipmate last week that said, she was about to attempt suicide and her brothers and sisters knew it, and she was just such a hard charger that they didn't want to call her out and force her into getting help because they were afraid that it was going to ruin the, like, when she was okay, when she was back on her feet, what did that leave for her? And so really talking through this stigma and being able to again prioritize life over career. Weight stigma is definitely still stigma in the military. When you are considered out of regulation, you are often subjected to ridicule, exclusion, or being seen as lazy or the weakest link. There are career consequences. If you fail a PRT or a BCA or being out of regulations, it's different across different branches. Some of them, it does get annotated on your evaluation and you're not as competitive as you would have been, or oftentimes they can pull your orders or you won't get to transfer to the place that maybe you were hoping to transfer. So there are career consequences to being out of standards, and so that can become a barrier to treatment because people are afraid of weight restoration or anything that comes along with that. Another issue that we see is that there are no routine screenings right now for eating disorders. We're really working hard on getting that changed and getting those put into the yearly physical health exam and then upon request at behavioral health. But at this point, that doesn't exist. And so this is acting as a barrier, and because we're not finding people early, right? And getting that early intervention, that early treatment. By the time it's becoming an issue, it's quite severe or it's been hidden or avoided. And so screenings are going to be so important on and getting those implemented so that it can be identified early. And then there are limitations with our medical insurance and the VA. Right now, TRICARE does not have to pay for inpatient or residential treatment over the age of 21. And we all know that eating disorders do not stop at the age of 21. And so we're working really hard. It was placed into law through the SERVE Act in 2023 for that age to be changed to 55 and to also mandate eating disorder education for military leadership. During 2024, that was not implemented through the Department of Defense, but we are working on advocacy and awareness, and I'm really hopeful that that's going to be implemented here very shortly. So what are some things that you can do? Number one, educate yourself. Learn about eating disorders. Um, uh, Learn what they are, what they look like, what some of the red flags are. Hint, there's more than three. A lot of people are still stuck on the 1990s idea that there was three eating disorders, right? So if that makes you curious, start Googling, start looking, and see how many there are, right? What do they look like? Um, Always talk to the individual in private. There's never a reason to call them out or call out their behavior, or comment on their food choices or their body in a public setting. Um, that being said, if there is more than one loved one that wants to come together for communication and to talk and provide support, that's appropriate. But when you do, you don't want to come across as accusatory. So use I statements, explain your concerns. I feel worried when you know, aren't hydrated or aren't taking care of yourself. You know, lead with an I statement. Stress the importance of professional and specialized help, right? You wouldn't go to a dentist for braces, right? Both issues are in the mouth, but both require specialized approach and comprehensive team for that specific issue. Um, and then be sure to validate, right? Be sure to validate that you understand what the struggles are, and the feelings, even if you don't understand the behaviors. Don't attempt to solve or fix their problems, and I'll even go as far as to say, you don't have to be the food police. Don't be the food police. That's not what the role or position that you're needed in. So you don't have to comment on the specific calories or food. If anything, that can become argumentative because everybody kind of looks at these numbers differently and what they feel is appropriate. So it's just best to leave those specific details out. Eating disorders are not specific to weight or size, right? And that's a big myth as well to educate yourself. A lot of people think eating disorders must mean you would be a specific size or look a certain way or a certain appearance, but that's absolutely just not factual. In fact, if you look at the data and statistics, only 6%, less than 6% of people with an eating disorder would fall into the underweight category. So you're not approaching this with information about their specific size or weight necessarily. And then we'll talk about resources. So we definitely want to talk about SEA WAVES and the ways that you can come to us for help and support. We do the comprehensive case management. We help you navigate to the resources that are available. We help you navigate through the TRICARE system and get you in touch with care that is free to you. And that means active duty service members, veterans, and their family members. We connect you through Project Heal right now and other really, really wonderful communities that have confidential virtual physician-led screenings. And so once you have this screening, you can do what you choose with it. You can take it back to your primary care manager. You can hold on to it. You can bring it to your family. This doesn't go automatically into your record. So if you're just wondering where you are on that scale of green, yellow, orange, red, then set up a screening for yourself, or your loved one. SEA WAVES has two programs. The first program we have is MEDAL, the Military Eating Disorder Awareness and Literacy Training. And this is where we go base to base or Zoom to Zoom, and we teach military leadership, eating disorders 101. Some of the red flags, what does it look like? What are some things that are helpful? What are some things that are definitely not helpful? And like this, where can they find support? And then we also do the advocacy and policy change, working on getting the SERVAC implemented through the Department of Defense. We are also in Military One Source. We are, of the 45,000 veteran service organizations, SEA WAVES is the only one in the eating disorder space, and we are in Military One Source. So if you go through them for all kinds of support, always free to you. And this is everything from mental health support to deployment support to going to a new duty station, to where do I file my taxes. So Military One Source is a great resource for all things military. We've also partnered with the crisis text line. If you text WAVES to 741-741, you will get somebody right away that is ED informed. They they like to say that yes, their name is crisis text line, but they like to talk to you before it's in a crisis to de-escalate things and talk to you on any level. You know, if you just you know, during the holidays, definitely, you know, you just wanted, it's Thanksgiving and everybody's there and they're talking food and you don't know if any of them will understand, you can just text crisis text line and you have support on the other end of the line there. And also Wounded Warrior Project. So many times, you know, our veterans get out of service and they're dealing with other disabilities and navigating through what their veteran journey is going to be like. And I'm happy to say that we do provide Wounded Warrior Project with our medal training, and they are eating disorder informed, and we are in their database as well. The second program that SEA WAVES has is the Lighthouse Project. And this is probably one of my favorite parts about being the founder of SEA WAVES. It's really the essence of taking your light and shining your light, however your light might be. For me, it's using my voice, knowing that I couldn't for so long, knowing that there's still people that need me to say these things because they can't right now, either because they're you know in service and concerned about their reputation, or because they're so far in the dark that they're silenced or just silently suffering. So I use my voice to shine my light and to shine a light for them. But what the amazing thing is about the Lighthouse Project is that when we use our voice or when we use our light to shine for others, it really does bring that purpose back for us too. And the light shines for us too. And you know, as you saw in the video, I have lost loved ones to suicide, and I know the impact of eating disorders and suicide. And I really wanted to make sure that we bring together community camaraderie and our light together, right? There's no way we're going to go after getting that number down from 22 veterans a day if we're shining our lights separately, right? So we have to shine them together. We have to come together. We have to shine the biggest lighthouse light in whatever way you can. And so we have people on our SEA WAVES team that do writing or art or organization, right? Find your light. I like to talk about, you know, maybe I'm aging myself, but back when I was younger, we watched the Care Bears, and I want you to recall the Care Bear stare, and I want you to think about the t-shirt. If you are wearing your Care Bear t-shirt today, right now, what emoji or picture or graphic would be on your shirt? So think about that. And maybe if you feel compelled, put it in the chat, right? We could look at them. But what would be on your shirt? And that could be your light. That's the light that you show. And it changes at different times. And you know, maybe you have a couple shirts in the closet, right? But that's what we need to do. We need to funnel our light and come together and be there. So we like to do that through SEA WAVES, through community camaraderie and self-care. So sometimes we get together together, veteran service members, and we make self-care products, everything from chapstick to candles to roller balls with essential oils, calming essential oils, and then we donate them or we give them out where they're needed. We adopted a ship at Christmas time. We sent 300 self-care packages out to the deployed ship so that they would have their self-care and different options for that. And then I visit different eating disorder facilities, and I'm always I got named at the last facility that I went to last week, Self-Care Santa. And that was really that I really liked that name, and so I'm gonna keep going forward with that and bring in like little self-care packages everywhere we can. So another short video about the Lighthouse Project, and then we'll be open to questions.
In life's darkest moments, when the waves feel overwhelming, a light shines through, offering hope. Need a light? Be a light. Sometimes we need that light to guide us through the storm. And once we've found our way, we can become that light for others. It's a simple truth. Support given is support returned. Together, we can brighten the path for those still in the darkness. Strength is found in the quiet moments and in the voices that say, "You're not alone." Real support, real change. This is the Lighthouse Project. Be the light that guides others. Join the mission. Visit www.seawaves.org.
And I just want to point out one more thing about the Lighthouse Project. If you look there, in between the first phrase and the second phrase, you'll recognize that symbol as a semicolon. And that's very intentional, right? Your story doesn't end here. You need a light, that's okay. It doesn't end there, and then you can be the light. And I'm happy to say that's where I am, and that's what I've done. And I'm really happy to have been able to spend this evening with you all.
Leah, that was so incredible. I really, from the first time that we met, I knew that you were as passionate about this work as I am with mine and with my knowledge. And I just cannot believe like the amount of time, energy, all of the things that you've dedicated to this and to your service as well. So thank you so much for being here with us. I have some wonderful questions that I'm going to read aloud, and you are totally welcome to answer with whatever knowledge you have. If you don't know anything, you can say, "I'll get back to you." I always want to make that clear before we do any Q&A. But truly, thank you, Leah.
Thanks.
Right. Our first question. My question around this is how to support folks as a therapist or provider who are in a branch of the military and active duty, and they have an eating disorder. People meet criteria and they still have to complete the physical tests, even though it's clear it is detrimental for them. These folks have consistently been declined for dietitian services, with their only option in the area being a military base where the resource is weight loss based. Client was forced to take a class about healthy eating, and when they had struggled with some behaviors that would be contradictory to that kind of class. This individual has tried to assist, but being out of the system has been really difficult for them. Any feedback or any knowledge on that kind of question?
Well, first, I want to validate that although that situation is absolutely upsetting and unfortunate, it's not unusual. It's very common. It's happening all the time. And this is why it's so important for us to continue to talk about the harm that's being done and the options that are available. So there were several parts to that. I want to start with saying that if and when possible, see if you can communicate directly with the command. right? I do offer myself liaison services, and especially when service members are transitioning from higher levels of care back to their command, and explaining kind of, you know, that experience that your service member has just been through, how to transition from blind weights where not only do they not know, like nobody in the room speaks about it, to public weights, and transitioning from again, you know, maybe returning to a different size uniform and things like that. I would say just doing what you're doing already tonight, like educating yourself and learning what some of the obstacles are and the barriers are, so we can be aware of them and come up with ways to knock down those barriers and navigate around them. There's always a command psych or a command chaplain, whichever one is, you know, a better fit for them, and sometimes bringing them into the transition of going back. Does it, you know, does it work? Not always, right? Like, I look back on my 20 years and different leaders that I had, and how some of them just would not have been open to that at all, and some of them would have been open to the conversation. So I would say to continue to try your best to advocate for them, and to help them prioritize life over career. And I don't say that lightly. I do not. Again, I'm dedicated to service, but you have to be alive to serve, right? And so maybe your service is not active duty, right? Maybe that's not for everybody. That being said, I want to make clear that I am a firm believer that eating disorders are healable. They can be healed, and they can are especially healable through treatment, right? And so if they're seeing you, they're already in the right place of getting that treatment, and just continuing to educate yourself and identifying, even though it's so confusing that you're seeing that they're put in programs, and that's so much where the stigma exists too. Unfortunately, I'll tell you, in the Navy, what that program is called is the Fat Boy program, right? And you're told in the morning, you know, report to the Fat Boy program before coming to work. And that's part of the thing. And so it's so harmful, but we have to continue to call it what it is. It's disordered and it's harmful.
Beautiful. Thank you for explaining that, Leah, and thank you for shedding that light on it. I know when you showed some of those slides with the normalization of recommendations for some of the folks seeking support from their peers, that was so like eye-opening to see just like how normalized so many of those things are. I have another question that brings in some intersectionality. With the now again restriction of transgender people being restricted from serving, do you have any resources or additional areas of knowledge or such for trans service members discharging with eating disorders? There are some folks that this person knows who were more stealth while serving and have PTSD from some specific usages of words in the military and have been discharged since the executive order in January came out this year, and they have been very much struggling with their eating disorders since they have discharged and started to begin to be able to attentively transition. And if there are any resources that were on your resource page, if they are trans and gender affirming and knowledgeable as well. Wanted to see if there was any knowledge that you had on that area too.
Yes. First, I want to say that my heart goes out to all our service members, all. And so, yes, every resource that SEA WAVES collaborates with and partners with is gender affirming and inclusive. of all people. So yes, we can start with the resource page on SEA WAVES. You can also reach out to me directly. There are specific programs and groups that are available. Now I'll say they're not specifically military transgender groups. Like we don't have enough yet, but maybe eventually we will for us to all come together. But there are eating disorder groups that are specifically for that demographic. And I will say that we struggle with you. That executive order that came out in January, at the bottom, it was targeted towards transgender, and then at the end it said also eating disorders are not compatible with military service. And so we all really felt that sting at that time. And there was a lot of fear. There's a lot of fear that's happening, and I want to validate that's scary, and it's a rough time. It's a rough time for us to have our family, our brothers and sisters suffering, and to have that extra layer. And there are so much data and studies that show the overlap between transgender and eating disorders, and there is specific support specifically for that. I have a couple of really great providers. So yes, please feel free to reach out, and I can get you in touch with any level of support if you're looking for just a virtual online group, an actual provider, a program, or even just a safe place to vent, right? Sometimes we just even need that. But we have a great community at SEA WAVES, and we have peer lead mentors, and I'd love to get them in touch with some safe resources.
Incredible. Thank you. Next question, are there opportunities for non-military mental health providers to become involved with SEA WAVES?
Absolutely. We love all of our providers. We have a great volunteer team. We meet every 2 weeks on Saturdays, and this is everybody from lived experience to military, veterans, civilians, loved ones, and we all show up with our light, whatever your light is. And so yours is a provider, and so there's ways to get involved in teaching trainings or advocacy, or whatever it is. If you're great with social media or outreach, all of the above. We have a really, really special and amazing team, and there is a volunteer form on the website. You can fill that out, and that will get us connected with our volunteer coordinator and get you started on that process.
Love that. And last thing is not a question, but a statement. And it is one person in the audience that says, I work for the VA and I'm trying to get an eating disorder program up and running at our individual medical center. Thank you for this presentation, your knowledge, and your story. I wanted to share that because truly right aligned with that person. Thank you so much, Leah.
Thank you. I do want to say to them that I do know that there is a pilot program that has been started at the Lake Nona VA. And so reach out to them to see what they have done. I can even connect you directly. Her name is Dr. Martha Strashcan, and she started that program in Lake Nona. And so while it's still in its infancy, they're starting it, they're doing it. So happy to connect and keep going. And if you need any guidance and support on that, I'm happy to do that as well.
Leah, thank you so much for your service, for your story, for being here with us all tonight. And thank you for sharing your light with us. It's really clear from the way that you speak and your voice and your story, the light that you are and that you've brought to all of us. So thank you so, so much. And thank you everyone for joining us this evening. And we look forward to hopefully seeing you again in the future, and hope that you're able to reach out to Leah with any follow-up questions and with any other interest of getting connected. Thanks, Leah.
Thank you.